Garrosh did nothing wrong. The name of Garrosh Hellscream carries with it a great deal of controversy. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that he gets the fanbase engaged the way that very few characters do. In this video, we will go over the list of the most popular quote-unquote crimes people usually attributed to him in no particular order, and I will do my best to explain his reasoning and why he acted the way he did. Number 1. He dropped a nuke on Thermal. One of the biggest quote-unquote crimes attributed to Garrosh is the nuking of Thermal. People say that he attacked Thermal unprovoked and used dishonorable tactics by dropping the mana bomb. But the truth is that Thermal was a legitimate military target. Let's start off with the false assumption that the attack was unprovoked. At that time, the war between the Alliance and the Horde was in progress, and Theramore served multiple factions for the Alliance. Theramore soldiers were actively attacking Horde targets in the Barrens, and then tried to establish a military line between the Night Elven territory and Theramore itself using their army. On top of that, it was used as a harbor for Alliance troops coming from the wetlands to Kalimdor, actively supporting the Alliance war effort. Now that we've got that out of the way, and established why Theramore was a legitimate military target, let's tackle the elephant in the room: the mana bomb that Garrosh dropped on it. Some would argue that it was dishonorable, that Garrosh should have taken Theramore by traditional means, through armed warfare and actual soldiers. But at that point, we have to ask, what constitutes honorable combat? Are goblin and gnome explosives fair? What about siege weapons? Tanks? Demolishers? Where do we draw the line? I believe that dropping the mana bomb was a perfectly valid tactic. He not only captured the city, but also greatly reduced the amount of Horde lives that would have been wasted. And let's not forget that in the novel War Crimes, Garrosh had his troops camp for days outside of Theramore before he actually attacked. On foot, might I add. This gave all the civilians more than enough time to leave, but in the end they chose to stay because they did not want to abandon their home. They chose their fate. Garrosh's decision to simply sit around and wait was heavily criticized by the other faction leaders like Bane Bloodhoof and Vol'jin. His actual reasoning was that he wanted the Alliance to bolster their forces. He wanted the city filled to the brim with their most veteran fighters and brilliant generals. His prediction came to reality thanks to the command of Varian. Many of the soldiers in the Horde even became agitated as Garrosh's true plan was mostly kept to Malkorok and the Korkron. Once he was satisfied with how long he had waited, he ordered the attack, which he spearheaded. The Horde even managed to push the Alliance into the center of the city, but that's when he called for a retreat. Now with the Alliance celebrating, he had them distracted. The Zeppelin carrying the focusing iris flew in and dropped the bomb. A flawless strategy. Number 2. He attacked the Night Elves. The incursion into the Night Elven realm is often listed as one of Garrosh's transgressions, so let's look at the backstory of these attacks. After the Cataclysm struck, Orgrimmar was burned down by wayward fire elementals, and other elementals were becoming more and more aggressive in Durotar. The orcs were suffering and needed supplies, which the Night Elves denied them. They refused any and all negotiations thanks to the Wrathgate fiasco. Any orc group that would go into Ashenvale to cut down lumber was hunted down and slaughtered by the elves. What was Garrosh supposed to do? He was the acting war chief and his people were in a time of desperate need. It was his duty to do whatever he could in order to ensure the survival of the Horde. His incursions were completely reactionary. As he said himself, "If our enemies should choose to push us, we will drive them into the ground." The orcs were pushed into taking an aggressive approach. That's why I believe the attack on the Night Elves in order to claim resources was completely justified. Number 3. The duel with Cairn and the poisoned weapon. Prior to the Cataclysm expansion, directly related to our previous point, Hamul Rune Totem, a Tauren druid, scheduled a meeting with Cenarian Circle druids of both the Horde and the Alliance to try and establish some sort of trade agreement. The talks were going well until a group of Twilight Hammer cultists interrupted the meeting and slaughtered everyone except Hamul. The Twilight's Hammer purposely used orcish cultists to try and sow discord between the factions, in which they succeeded. Hamul immediately went to Cairn Bloodhoof and told him that orcs interrupted the meeting and slaughtered everyone. And since they were orcs, Cairn assumed that this must have been Garrosh's doing. He stormed into Orgrimmar, accused Garrosh of the crime, and without letting him explain that he had nothing to do with it, he challenged Garrosh to a Makura. Now, what you have to understand is that Garrosh couldn't really refuse the challenge, as it would have been an act of cowardice. It would have dishonored him. So he accepted, but insisted on using the old rules, a fight to the death. As you can see, the duel was not initiated by Garrosh, but rather by Cairn's prejudice against him. Now, as the second charge, the poisoned weapon. It is tradition that warriors have their weapons blessed by shamans before the battle. Magatha Grimtotem approached Garrosh and offered to bless his axe, which Garrosh took as a good omen, a sign that not all Tauren were against him, and so he accepted. And Magatha, without Garrosh's knowledge, poisoned his weapon to ensure that Cairn would lose the duel. There have been many people arguing that Garrosh should have known that Magatha was a trickster, and that she hated Cairn and his people deeply, and so should have sensed something was wrong. But you have to understand that Garrosh came to Azeroth for the first time in his life sometime during the Burning Crusade expansion, and almost immediately after that, he went to Northrend to combat the Lich King. He had no exposure to the inner politics of the various races of the Horde. He could not have known that Magatha was going to poison Gorhal. In fact, after he found out about this, he sent a messenger to Magatha, who at the time was occupying Thunderbluff, and had asked for Garrosh's assistance in holding it. The letter reads as follows. On to Elder Crone Magatha Grimtotem, acting Warchief of the Horde, Garrosh Hellscream sends his most sincere wishes for a slow and painful death. It has come to my attention that you have deprived me of a rightful kill. Cairn Bloodhoof was a hero of the Horde and an honorable member of a usually honorable race. It is with disgust and anger that I discovered you have caused me to bring about his death through accidental treachery. Such tactics may work well for your renegade, honorless tribe and alliance scum, but I despise them. It was my wish to fight Cairn fairly and win or lose by my own skill or lack of it. Now, I shall never know, and the cry of traitor will dog my steps until such a time as I can sport your head on a pike and point to you as the real traitor. So, no, I will not be sending any true-hearted orcs to fight alongside your treacherous, belly-crawling tribe. Your victory or your defeat is in the hands of your Earth Mother now. Either way, I look forward to hearing of your demise. You are on your own, Magatha, as friendliless and disliked as you have ever been. Perhaps more. Enjoy your loneliness. I believe that it's unfair to blame Garrosh for this, as he wanted to duel Cairn fairly. Number 4. Kicking the trolls out of Orgrimmar. This charge is just flat out false. Vol'jin led his trolls out of Orgrimmar on his own, because he felt insulted that his people were delegated to the slums near the side gate of Orgrimmar. While on the surface, this might look like an asshole thing to do, Garrosh didn't do this out of the blue. He told Vol'jin to take his people to the slums after a heated conversation with him, in which Vol'jin outright said, "Ya be no war chief of mine." This is the equivalent of going up to a general in the military and telling him that you don't have to follow his orders and that he has no authority over you. How do you think the general would respond? My guess is that he would probably have the soldier clean the urinals with his own toothbrush. Garrosh had to punish him in some way, because if you let such actions slide, you risk losing the authority of your position. Had Vol'jin stuck around and waited for Garrosh's anger to subside, I believe his people would have been let back into Orgrimmar proper. Number 5. Vol'jin's assassination attempt. This next charge is a big one. As I am sure we all remember, during the Dagger in the Dark scenario in Mists of Pandaria, we see an assassination attempt on Vol'jin by a group of Kor'kron orcs. First, let us tackle the actual order that Garrosh gave to his Kor'kron. Prior to this scenario, there is a conversation between him and his soldiers that the players cannot hear. But we finally find out what that was that Garrosh said in the book War Crimes, written by Christy Golden. Garrosh didn't tell his soldier to outright lead Vol'jin into a secluded location and murder him. No, he told them to gauge his reaction to the Mogu techniques they were searching for, and should Vol'jin display treasonous behavior by speaking out against it, to kill him. Now, once again, we have to understand the greater picture. At this point, Vol'jin had already gone against Garrosh numerous times. He participated in secret meetings in which he and other members of the rebellious horde spoke out against him, and he threatened to murder him from the shadows. Not only that, he called Garrosh inept. He said it despised him, that he would stand back and laugh as Garrosh failed time after time as the horde grew to hate him. This was just another brick in the wall. Vol'jin had gone against Garrosh time and time again, his direct commander to whom he had sworn a blood oath, and instead of challenging him to a mak'gora like Cairn had, he preferred to plot in the shadows. Now, why did Vol'jin hate Garrosh so much? I would bet that the average player could not give a precise answer as to why. There are two reasons. The first one is because he killed Cairn Bloodhoof, one of Vol'jin's closest friends. I doubt Vol'jin would have liked Garrosh even if he had killed Cairn in a fair fight. The second reason is because Garrosh told Vol'jin he had no part in the victories against the Lich King during Hellscream's War Chief ceremony, and he wasn't wrong. Vol'jin and most of the Darkspear was busy retaking the Echo Isles from Zalazane, while the main Horde forces went to Northrend to kill the Lich King. So the first reason was Vol'jin being angry that his friend had been killed after falsely accusing the war chief and challenged him to mak'gora. And the second reason was because Vol'jin got offended due to Garrosh correcting him after a false claim of accomplishment. And therefore I believe that Hellscream's actions taken against Vol'jin were completely justifiable. To sum it up, Vol'jin was being a whiny, frog-kissing bitch. Number 6. Alienating other races of the Horde. One of the biggest negative traits attributed to Garrosh is xenophobia. Looking down on anyone who's not an orc. He certainly did that at the end, but let's look at the reason for it. When Thrall appointed him as war chief, Garrosh flat out told him that he did not wish to be in that position, that he'd much rather hold an axe than a scroll. Thrall pressured him into accepting and told him that should he need help, he would have Vol'jin and Cairn to advise him. What happened at the very first signs of struggle? Cairn wrongfully accused Garrosh of a crime he had nothing to do with, and challenged him to a duel for the leadership of the Horde. Vol'jin threatened to assassinate Garrosh to his face during a conversation you can see in the troll leveling experience. Right from the get-go, they were against him. Now let's fast forward a bit and look at the events leading up to Mists of Pandaria and the bombing of Theramore. Garrosh called on all races of the Horde to march on the Alliance and welcome them into his army. Forsaken, Sindori, Tauren, Troll, even Goblins. He welcomed them each warmly while remarking on their strength and loyalty. The only race he disliked at the time were Goblins, and that's because their leader Gallywix struck him as a greedy and opportunistic asshole, which he was, and still is. Now let's take a look at why Garrosh had disdain for the other races within the Horde. The Darkspear trolls showed that they were frog-kissing primitives with a leader that threatened Garrosh the second he became Warchief. And because of what? Because Garrosh told him that he was not a part of their success in Northrend? Because Garrosh killed his friend Cairn? Cairn Bloodhoof knew full well what he did when he challenged the Warchief. The Tauren showed Garrosh through Magatha Grimtotem's actions that they were flower-picking medium rares, or as he called them, a belly-crawling race. They proved to him that they would do anything in order to achieve their goals, dirty or not. The machine fetish-filled goblins only cared about money and social power. That was basically what their leader embodied. The Forsaken or Dead Alliance members forced back to the world of the living to serve Sylvanas the Bitch Queen, just like Garrosh said when Sylvanas raised the corpses in Silverpine Forest.
What you have done here, Sylvanas, it goes against the laws of nature.
The Blood Elves, or the skipping fairy he-she's, showed their true colors in patch 5.1. They were about to rejoin the Alliance before Jaina put a stop to that. Not too much needs to be said about the fat, bumbling bamboo eaters known as Pandaren. He used them for a time before excluding them as well. Later on, when they all joined the rebellion against him, could you really blame him for feeling betrayed and standing with the orcs alone? I certainly can't. All the other races of the Horde betrayed him and went against him at every turn. Of course he eventually started moving more and more away from them. But even during the siege of Orgrimmar, you can see goblins at his side, and at a very high position at that. Siegecrafter Blackfuse and his company had a workshop deep within his stronghold below Orgrimmar, and even followed him to Draenor. He truly cared about the Horde. In his own words, quote,
"The Horde will prevail. Our suffering is at an end. When this war is won, our people will see prosperity at last. I won't let my people starve to death in the desert. I will stop at nothing to ensure a proud and glorious future for the orcs and anyone with the courage to stand with us."
Number 6. Using the heart of Y'Shaarj. Using the powers of Y'Shaarj was for many people a very controversial move on Garrosh's part. But once again, as with the mana bomb, I ask, where do we draw the line? Both the Horde and the Alliance deploy warlocks that use fel magic, which has been shown to devastate entire worlds, and will summon demons that will fight for them. Yet this is acceptable? Both the factions have shadow priests who tap directly into the void and its destructive and corrupting powers, and yet this is acceptable? Why should the heart of Y'Shaarj be any different? Many people say that the heart of Y'Shaarj corrupted Garrosh as opposed to the warlocks and priests who has full control over their powers. But is that really the case? I'd like to draw your attention to this tweet made by Jeremy Faisal, a senior game designer for World of Warcraft. In response to a question whether Garrosh was corrupted by the heart, he writes, "He wasn't corrupted or controlled, yes, but his personality flaws, e.g. xenophobia, certainly came out at 110%. And there we have it. Garrosh wasn't corrupted. He merely had his emotions amplified. The heart had no effect on his thought process. As for the xenophobia part, we have already gone over this in our previous point and the reasons behind it. At the very end of Nagrand, in Warlords of Draenor, we witness a duel between Garrosh and Thrall. Garrosh stands there, looking at Thrall, perhaps thinking of everything that has transpired between them. Then upon hearing that he has to answer for his crimes, he grows furious. You can see his face twist with anger as he charges at Thrall.
All I did for the Horde!
We hear him yell. He tried to work with the other leaders. He tried to bring prosperity to the Horde. He wanted to end the constant suffering of his people, and all he gets for it is blame and accusations.
You failed the Horde,
yells Thrall, which causes Garrosh to temporarily drop his guard. He throws his axe at Thrall and grabs him, slams him into the ground, and with a tremendous outbring of emotion, he yells,
You made me war chief! You left me to pick up your pieces!
His voice slightly cracking up.
You failed me!
He picks up Thrall above his head and throws him to the ground, all of his emotions pouring out of him. After Thrall told Garrosh that his father died a hero's death and brought him to Azeroth, he became a sort of father figure to Garrosh. Note that when Garrosh starts doing quote-unquote bad things, Thrall doesn't come to Orgrimmar to speak with him, to advise him. No. When he came back, it was to kill him. And we see the same in this cinematic. After telling Thrall everything that has been weighing on his heart, Garrosh lifts him up and throws him to the ground. He could have easily crushed his spine right there, but he didn't. He just stands there breathing heavily and stares at Thrall, almost as if he was expecting a response. Something. Anything. But Thrall, sensing his intimate defeat, cheats in the duel and uses his shamanistic powers to brutally execute Garrosh. A Makura, that is to the death, is the traditional one. And these are the traditional rules. Number 1. The fight is to the death. Number 2. Only one weapon is allowed, but can be blessed by a shaman if both parties agree on it. Number 3. Body armor is forbidden. Number 4. Each participant had to have at least one witness. Thrall used his hammer, fire, earth, nature, and wind magic. That's 5 weapons. On top of that, he uses full body armor beneath his robes. Garrosh, however, follows all of these rules besides having a witness, but Thrall didn't have one either, so it cancels it out. What Thrall did is the equivalent of bringing a gun to a cage match. Knowing that death is about to claim him, Garrosh lets out his last words.
You made me what I am.
He's right. He told Thrall numerous times that he did not wish to be war chief. Garrosh was an amazing tactician in general. He told Thrall to point him at his enemies and he will take care of them. He practically begged him not to leave, and even after he was appointed war chief, he asked Thrall if he would come back soon to relieve him of this heavy burden. Everything that has happened was Thrall's fault. He knows it, and that's why he kills Garrosh, to silence that annoying pain of guilt in his heart. We all saw how Garrosh gave us a last hurrah in the Shadowlands expansion. Even in death, he stayed true to his beliefs and actions, doubling down when the world was against him. It was then that in a fiery explosion he slew his tormentor at the cost of his own soul. A warrior's death, worthy of a true orc, just like his father. Many people claim that his legacy is now completely gone as he had never married or fathered a child. And this is true. Garrosh was married to the Horde, his people, his purpose. But if Blizzard really wanted to, they could change all that. Now you might ask, how the hell could they do that? Simple. Warlord Zayla. During the Cataclysm expansion, Zayla and the Dragonmaw clan was liberated from their corrupt war chief by the players in the Twilight Highlands. After Garrosh met with the Battle Maiden, he was very impressed with her and welcomed Zayla and her people to the Horde. To a few people, their connection was obvious, later made even more evident by the fact that Garrosh let her keep her title and entrusted her with the defense of Dranoshar Landing during the Siege of Orgrimmar. Their connection was even referenced on Zayla's official Wowpedia page. Quote, "Many fans pair Garrosh with Zayla due to their loyalty to each other and mutual respect. It was then even revealed that Zayla was originally going to travel to Draenor with Garrosh, stated here. Even Zayla's dying words point towards their chemistry.
I'm sorry, Garrosh. I have failed you."
If Blizzard really wanted, they could go back and simply say that Garrosh and Zayla had a secret child during the Cataclysm. This would make the now boy or girl 17 years of age. Picture it. We could have the son or daughter of Zayla and Garrosh lead the Horde into a new glorious future, finishing Hellscream's work. In conclusion, as you can see, there is far more to Garrosh Hellscream than the xenophobic warmonger that people often portray him as. The goal of this video was to show that for every one of his supposed misdoings, there were strong and understandable reasons behind them, and that it's really easy to sympathize with him once you really get into his head and analyze what it was that drove him. He didn't want to be war chief, but once he took that mantle, he tried his best to serve the interest of the Horde as a whole, not just his orcs. But over time, as more and more leaders turned away from him, he started distancing himself from them, which I completely understand. Without Hellscream, there is no more faction pride in this so-called Horde. The Horde died with Garrosh. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you happen to have any opposing views or arguments, feel free to post them down in the comments.
So that I know exactly where to send the Corkron. Remember this, Hellscream's eyes are upon you.